The bank manager smiled as he congratulated my husband on mortgaging my company. Everyone in the room believed he had just taken control of my business. No one realized one small clause in the loan agreement made me the only person with the power to destroy the deal. 48 hours later, he lost everything. Victoria Hayes built Hayes Creative Group from a tiny rented office with one second-hand laptop and a dream that refused to die. 12 years later, the company had grown into one of Chicago's fastest-rising marketing agencies, employing more than 200 people and serving Fortune 500 clients. Every late night, every sacrifice, and every dollar she had earned had gone into building the business. Her husband, Daniel Brooks, had joined only 3 years earlier as the company's chief financial officer after losing his own job. Victoria believed she was giving the man she loved a second chance. She trusted him with the company's finances because she trusted him with her heart. On a Monday morning, Victoria flew to New York to negotiate the biggest contract in the company's history, a deal worth nearly $40 million over 5 years. Before boarding the plane, she kissed Daniel goodbye and reminded him, "Don't make any major financial decisions until I get back." Daniel smiled warmly, hugged her, and replied, "Don't worry. Everything will be exactly the way you left it." The moment Victoria's flight took off, Daniel drove straight to a private bank instead of returning to the office. Waiting for him inside was his younger brother, Ryan, along with a loan officer. Daniel confidently placed confidential company documents on the table and quietly said, "By this time next week, Hayes Creative Group will belong to us." The loan officer hesitated. "Does your wife know you're using the company as collateral?" Daniel smirked. "She doesn't need to." Pens were signed. Papers were stamped. Millions of dollars in loans were approved against Victoria's company without her knowledge. 3 days later, Victoria landed back in Chicago after successfully closing the largest deal of her career. She walked into company headquarters expecting applause from her employees. Instead, she found strangers standing inside her office, removing framed photographs from the walls. One man looked up, handed her an official notice, and calmly said, "Ma'am, this company has been placed under foreclosure proceedings." Victoria stared at the paper in disbelief. Someone had mortgaged the business she had spent 12 years building. And only one person had the authority to make it happen. Victoria stood frozen in the lobby, unable to understand what she was reading. The foreclosure notice carried her company's name, the official bank seal, and a signature authorizing the business as collateral for a multi-million-dollar commercial loan. Her hands trembled as she turned the final page. The signature looked like hers. But it wasn't. She knew every curve of her own handwriting. Someone had copied it almost perfectly. "Who approved this?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. The bank representative looked surprised. "Your chief financial officer, Daniel Brooks. He said you signed everything before leaving for New York." Victoria felt her stomach drop. Daniel. Her husband. The man she had trusted with every financial decision. Before she could speak again, Daniel walked confidently out of the executive elevator with his younger brother Ryan beside him. Both men were smiling as if nothing unusual had happened. "There you are," Daniel said casually. "How was New York?" Victoria slowly held up the foreclosure documents. "What is this?" Daniel didn't even pretend to be shocked. "It's just a business decision." "A business decision?" Victoria whispered. Ryan stepped forward with a smug grin. "The company needed capital. We took a loan." "Relax." Victoria stared at both of them in disbelief. "You mortgaged my company without telling me?" Daniel folded his arms. "Our company." "No," Victoria replied quietly. "My company." Daniel laughed. "You've always been too emotional. Ryan and I know how real business works." Victoria looked around the office she had built from nothing. Employees had stopped working. Everyone was silently watching. Some looked confused. Others looked frightened. Then Daniel dropped the sentence that shattered the room. Starting today, he announced loudly, Ryan will oversee all major financial decisions. Victoria needs a break after everything she's been through. The office fell completely silent. Victoria realized this wasn't just about a loan. They were trying to remove her from the company she had created. She took one slow breath, picked up the foreclosure papers, and looked directly into Daniel's eyes. Tell me one thing. What? Which bank approved this loan? Daniel smiled confidently. First National Commercial Bank. For the first time since walking into the building. Victoria smiled. Just a small smile. Because Daniel had made one mistake. A mistake so enormous. It would destroy everything he thought he had once. Victoria left the office without saying another word. Daniel watched her walk away and laughed quietly. See, he said to Ryan. She finally understands she lost. Ryan grinned. By next week, we'll own the company. Neither of them noticed that Victoria wasn't driving home. Instead, she parked outside the downtown headquarters of First National Commercial Bank. The receptionist immediately recognized her. Good afternoon, Ms. Hayes. Victoria smiled politely. I need to speak with Executive Vice President Michael Carter. Only 5 minutes later, she stepped into a private conference room where Michael stood to greet her. I heard about the foreclosure notice, he said. I'm sorry this happened. Victoria placed the loan documents on the table. I need one answer. Michael carefully reviewed every page before his expression changed. Who approved this? Our commercial lending department. Victoria pointed to the signature page. Is this enough to take my company? Michael slowly shook his head. No. Victoria frowned. Then why was the loan approved? Michael opened a confidential digital file connected to Hayes Creative Group. Because your husband submitted documents claiming he had full financial authority. And he doesn't? Michael smiled slightly. Not even close. He turned his computer screen toward Victoria. Years earlier, when Victoria first expanded her company, she had negotiated a special financing agreement with the bank. At her father's insistence, every commercial loan required one non-negotiable condition. Only the founder and majority owner could legally authorize any mortgage against the company. Daniel's position as CFO gave him access to financial records. It did not give him the authority to pledge the business as collateral. Michael looked directly at Victoria. Legally, this entire loan can be declared fraudulent. Victoria remained silent. Michael continued. But that's not the interesting part. He opened another confidential folder. Our fraud department has already started reviewing the signatures. Victoria looked surprised. What did they find? Michael slid the forensic report across the table. The signature on these documents wasn't yours. It was traced. Victoria slowly read the conclusion. Forgery confirmed. For a few seconds, the room became completely silent. Then Michael leaned forward. Victoria, if we report this today, the bank won't just cancel the loan. He paused. We'll open a criminal fraud investigation against Daniel Brooks. Victoria closed the report and looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. Daniel believed he had stolen her company. He didn't realize he had just committed a felony against the very bank that had protected her business from the beginning. The following morning, Daniel arrived at Hayes Creative Group wearing his usual confident smile. He walked through the office greeting employees as if he were already the company's new owner. Ryan was already sitting in Victoria's executive office, feet on her desk, proudly telling managers about the new direction the company would take. Several longtime employees exchanged uncomfortable glances but remained silent. They had watched Victoria build the company from nothing. None of them believed she would simply disappear. At exactly 9 a.m., the glass doors opened. Victoria walked inside wearing a tailored black suit, carrying a single leather folder. Behind her came Michael Carter from First National Commercial Bank, 2 members of the bank's fraud division, and a federal financial crimes investigator. The entire office fell silent. Daniel's smile instantly faded. "What is this?" he asked nervously. Michael stepped forward and placed an official notice on the conference table. Mr. Daniel Brooks, First National Commercial Bank has officially canceled commercial loan number 78421 due to confirmed financial fraud and forged authorization documents. Ryan jumped to his feet. "You can't do that. We have a signed agreement." Michael calmly opened the forensic report. The signature authorizing this mortgage was professionally examined by 3 independent handwriting experts. He slid the report across the table. It was forged. Daniel felt the color drain from his face. Victoria said nothing. She simply watched. The federal investigator then spoke. "Mr. Brooks, we also have security footage from the bank showing you presenting documents while falsely claiming full ownership authority." Daniel's hands began to shake. I can explain." Before he could continue, the investigator added, "You can explain during your formal interview." Ryan looked at Daniel in complete panic. "You told me everything was legal." Daniel couldn't answer. For the first time, he realized the plan he believed would make him wealthy had become evidence in a criminal investigation. Victoria finally looked him in the eyes. "You thought you were stealing my company." She slowly closed the folder. "You actually handed me the strongest case I've ever had." The investigator turned toward Daniel. "Mr. Brooks, you are now officially under investigation for forgery, bank fraud, and attempted financial theft." The office became completely silent as every employee watched the man who had tried to steal the company realize that his empire had collapsed before it had even begun. News of the investigation spread through Chicago's business community within hours. Financial websites, local newspapers, and television stations all carried the same headline. "CEO cleared after forgery scheme exposed inside multi-million-dollar company." Victoria never gave interviews. She simply returned to work while reporters waited outside the building. Her silence spoke louder than any press conference ever could. Daniel wasn't as fortunate. His bank accounts were temporarily frozen while investigators reviewed every transaction connected to the fraudulent loan. His professional accounting license was immediately suspended, and the Board of Financial Ethics opened disciplinary proceedings against him. By the end of the week, every company he had once worked with had quietly ended their business relationships. Ryan's situation wasn't much better. When investigators searched his office, they discovered emails discussing how they planned to remove Victoria permanently after gaining control of the company. Those emails became critical evidence proving the fraud had been carefully planned long before Victoria left for New York. 3 weeks later, the board of directors held an emergency meeting. Every employee gathered inside the conference hall. Victoria entered first. Daniel entered moments later with his attorney, looking exhausted and defeated. The chairman of the board stood. After reviewing all evidence, forensic reports, banking records, and witness statements, this board unanimously recognizes Victoria Hayes as the sole legal owner and chief executive officer of Hayes Creative Group. The room erupted into applause. The chairman continued. Daniel Brooks is permanently removed from every position within this company, effective immediately. Daniel lowered his head. Then came the final announcement. Because this fraud caused severe financial damage to the company, Hayes Creative Group has filed a civil lawsuit seeking full compensation for all losses. Daniel looked toward Victoria. "Please," he whispered. "Drop the lawsuit." Victoria met his eyes calmly. "When I trusted you, you tried to steal everything I built." She paused before delivering the words he would never forget. This lawsuit isn't revenge. It's accountability. Security officers quietly escorted Daniel and Ryan out of the building. As the elevator doors closed behind them, employees stood and applauded the woman who had built the company, protected it, and refused to let betrayal destroy everything she had worked 4.3 months past, and Hayes' creative group became stronger than ever. Instead of hiding from the scandal, Victoria used it as motivation to rebuild the company with complete transparency. She introduced stricter financial controls, independent audits, and employee profit sharing. Clients who had briefly paused their contracts returned in record numbers after seeing how professionally she had handled the crisis. Several major corporations even signed new agreements, saying they trusted a leader who chose honesty over shortcuts. One quiet afternoon, Daniel requested a final meeting through his attorney. Against everyone's advice, Victoria agreed, but only in the company conference room, with her lawyer present. Daniel entered looking like a completely different man. His expensive designer suits had been replaced with a simple gray jacket. His confidence was gone. He carried only a small folder and avoided eye contact. "I came to apologize," he said softly. Victoria remained silent. "I wasn't thinking about us anymore. I only cared about money. I convinced myself I deserved everything you built." He placed the folder on the table. "I've signed over every remaining asset that's legally mine to help repay the damages." Victoria glanced at the documents but didn't touch them. "I don't need your assets, Daniel." He looked surprised. "What I needed was a husband who believed in me instead of competing with me." Daniel lowered his head. "I know. I destroyed my marriage because I couldn't accept your success." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Victoria stood. "I truly hope you become a better person." Daniel looked up hopefully. "But that future won't include me." She walked toward the door before stopping one last time. "Success didn't destroy our marriage." She turned to face him. "Your jealousy did." Those words hit harder than any courtroom verdict ever could. Daniel watched the door close behind her, realizing that losing the company had hurt. But losing the only person who had always believed in him. That was the punishment he would carry for the rest of his life. 6 months after the scandal, Hayes' creative group celebrated the most successful year in its history. Revenue had nearly doubled, employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, and the company was named one of the top 100 best places to work in America. Business magazines praised Victoria Hayes not just for saving her company, but for transforming a devastating betrayal into an inspiring comeback story. Every new employee learned the same lesson during orientation: integrity would always matter more than profit. On the evening of the company's annual gala, Victoria stood on stage before hundreds of employees, clients, and community leaders. Looking around the ballroom, she smiled as she remembered the day strangers had walked into her office carrying foreclosure papers. Back then, she thought she had lost everything. Now she understood she had only lost the people who never deserved to stand beside her. As the applause faded, Daniel quietly entered the back of the ballroom. He wasn't invited to speak. He simply wanted to witness the life he had thrown away. From a distance, he watched everyone celebrating the woman he had once tried to destroy. For the first time, he truly understood that success could never be stolen, it had to be earned. Victoria accepted the Business Leadership Award and stepped to the microphone. "When someone betrays you," she began, "it's easy to believe your life is over. But betrayal doesn't define your future. Your response does. I didn't rebuild this company because I wanted revenge. I rebuilt it because I refused to let someone else's greed decide the ending of my story." The audience rose for a standing ovation. Victoria looked across the room one final time before finishing with the words that would later appear in newspapers across the country. "The greatest revenge isn't watching the people who hurt you fail. It's building a life so successful, so peaceful, and so meaningful that they become nothing more than a chapter you no longer need to read." As the crowd applauded, Daniel quietly turned and walked out into the night, carrying only the weight of his own choices. Victoria remained on stage, surrounded by the people who believed in her, finally understanding that the company she had built was never her greatest achievement. Her greatest achievement was proving that honesty, courage, and resilience will always outlast betrayal.